Now, before you get upset, yes, it's true. Some people really do collect Social Security benefits, even though they never paid a single dime into the system. But it's not what the rumor mill or the internet will have you believe. In fact, the truth is far more surprising, and you might even know someone who qualifies without realizing it. Stick with me until the end, because I'm going to break down exactly who gets these benefits, how it's legal, and why it's not as unfair as you might think. And before we dive in, tap that like button. Tell me in the comments if you've ever heard this claim before, and hit subscribe so you never miss important updates that could affect your benefits. 1. Understanding the myth versus reality. Let's start by clearing the air, because this is one of those topics that spreads like wildfire at senior centers, over coffee, and in Facebook groups. I can't tell you how many times I've been approached by a client or a neighbor with a tone of frustration in their voice, saying, I worked for over 40 years, paid into Social Security every single paycheck. And now I find out that people who never worked a day in their life are getting the same benefits as me. Now, I understand where that reaction comes from. You've spent decades waking up early, commuting in the rain, paying taxes before you even see your paycheck. And naturally, you want to believe that what you've earned is yours and yours alone. So when you hear that others get benefits without paying in, it feels like someone's cutting in line. But here's the thing. Most of those stories you hear at the grocery store or read on social media are missing critical details. Social Security is not a personal savings account with your name on it. It's not like a piggy bank where your own money sits waiting for you in retirement. Instead, it's a large insurance system, one where today's workers fund the benefits of today's retirees. And because it's insurance, there are rules about who's covered, even if they didn't personally pay in. When people only hear the headline, some people get Social Security without working, it sounds outrageous. But once you understand the categories, the legal framework, and the reasons behind them, the picture changes completely. In fact, some of the people you know who fall into this category might surprise you, and you might even be grateful the rules exist if you ever needed them yourself. 2. Spousal and survivor benefits. Let me give you one of the most common and most misunderstood examples: spousal benefits. Imagine a couple from the 1970s. The husband works as a mechanic for 35 years, paying Social Security taxes the whole time. The wife stays home, raises 3 children, manages the household, and maybe works part-time here and there, but never long enough to earn the required 40 work credits. By the time they're in their 60s, the husband is eligible for full Social Security retirement benefits. But here's where it surprises people. The wife, who never met the 10-year work requirement, is also eligible for a benefit of up to 50% of her husband's amount. Now, before you say that's not fair, think about this. Without that spousal benefit, she could be left with nothing in her own name after decades of unpaid labor that directly supported her husband's career. Spousal benefits recognize that staying home to raise children, maintain a household, and support a working spouse has economic value, even if it's not tracked on a tax form. Survivor benefits work in a similar way. If the working spouse passes away, the surviving spouse may be entitled to the full retirement amount the deceased would have received. For widows and widowers, this can mean the difference between keeping their home and living in poverty. These benefits aren't a loophole. They're intentional. Congress understood that a marriage often functions like an economic partnership. One spouse may work in the formal labor force, while the other contributes in ways that make that work possible. Social Security's spousal and survivor benefits are designed to protect the entire household, not just the person who collected the paychecks. 3. Disabled adult children. Now, here's a category that truly opens people's eyes: disabled adult children receiving benefits based on a parent's work record. The first time I handled one of these cases, the family came to me completely unaware it was even an option. Their son, let's call him Michael, had a developmental disability since birth. He had never been able to work full-time and was now in his 30s, living at home. His father had worked for 40 years and was about to retire. When the father's benefits began, Michael became eligible to receive a check every month without ever having paid into Social Security himself. Why? Because the law says if a disability begins before the age of 22 and the parent is retired, disabled, or deceased, the child can receive what's called a disabled adult child benefit, based on that parent's earnings record. This is not charity. It's not free money from nowhere. It's the result of that parent's decades of contributions. Think of it like a form of dependent coverage, similar to how health insurance can cover a child, even if the child never paid the premiums themselves. These benefits can be a lifeline for families who've been caring for an adult child with significant disabilities. And yet, I meet parents all the time who don't know this exists. They assume because their child never worked, there's no way to qualify. The truth is, if you meet the criteria, the law protects you. For dependent children of retirees or deceased workers, this one really catches people off guard because they never picture children when they think of Social Security, but it's more common than you might think. If a parent is retired, disabled, or has passed away, their dependent children may be entitled to benefits until they turn 18, or even 19 if they're still in high school full-time. I've even seen cases where a retiree in their 60s has a teenage child from a later-in-life relationship, and that child receives a monthly benefit check. From the outside, someone might see that check arriving and think, that kid never worked, so why is the government sending them money? But the reality is that benefit is tied entirely to the working parent's record. It's an extension of the parent's earned benefit, just distributed to support the dependent child. These payments can help cover school costs, food, clothing, and other essentials. And in cases where the working parent has died, these benefits can keep a surviving family afloat financially during an already devastating time. I've had widows tell me that these checks were the only thing keeping their kids in the same school district after losing their spouse. That's exactly why this provision exists. 5. Non-citizens who paid in while working legally in the U.S. Now we get to one of the most controversial and often misunderstood points: non-citizens receiving Social Security. If you've ever heard the claim, people just move here and start getting Social Security checks, I'm here to tell you that's not how it works. To qualify, a non-citizen has to meet very specific conditions. In most cases, they must have worked legally in the United States long enough to earn the same 40 work credits required of citizens. That means paying into the system through payroll taxes, just like anyone else. In other words, their eligibility is based on contributions, not citizenship status alone. There's also something called a totalization agreement. This is an agreement between the U.S. and certain other countries that lets people who worked in both countries combine their work credits to qualify for benefits. For example, if someone worked 7 years in the U.S. and 15 years in Canada, they may be able to combine those periods to meet the 10-year requirement for benefits here. But here's the critical part. In these cases, they're not getting something for nothing. Either they or their country's system through an agreement have paid into Social Security. It's not a free handout. It's part of an international arrangement to prevent people from losing retirement coverage when they've split their working life between countries. Unfortunately, these facts rarely make it into the sensational posts or headlines, which is why it's so important to separate rumor from reality. 6. Special groups like railroad workers and certain federal employees. Here's one category that's rarely discussed outside of legal or retirement planning circles, yet it sometimes fuels the "they didn't work for it" misunderstanding. Before Social Security became what it is today, certain professions had their own retirement systems completely separate from it. A classic example is the railroad retirement system. If you worked for the railroad, your retirement contributions didn't go into Social Security. They went into a dedicated railroad pension program. Now here's where the confusion starts. Due to legislation and reciprocal agreements between these retirement systems, some railroad retirees or their dependents receive Social Security benefits in addition to or in place of railroad retirement benefits, even if they never paid into Social Security directly. The same goes for certain federal employees hired before Social Security coverage was extended to government workers. These individuals contributed to different pension plans, but through government transfers and special provisions, they might end up with Social Security eligibility later in life. From the outside, it looks like they're getting something for nothing. But behind the scenes, funds are often transferred between the special retirement system and Social Security to make it financially even. In other words, it's not the general taxpayer footing an extra bill, it's a coordinated accounting arrangement between agencies. It's one of those situations where the paperwork is incredibly boring, but the public perception can be explosive. 7. Why this exists, the legal reasoning. This is where my lawyer hat comes firmly on, because if you don't understand the why, it's easy to get frustrated at the what. Social Security isn't a personal account with your name and contributions locked away. It's a social insurance program designed to reduce poverty, spread risk, and ensure that certain groups in society, especially the elderly, disabled, and survivors, have a financial safety net. Think about car insurance. You might drive for 40 years without a single accident and never file a claim, but your premiums are still used to pay for someone else's accident next month. In the same way, the payroll taxes you paid during your career were immediately used to fund benefits for someone else's parent, spouse, or disabled child. When your time comes to collect, today's workers will be paying for you. The categories we've talked about, spouses, widows, disabled adult children, they're written into law because Congress recognized that the workforce isn't just made up of individuals. People live in families. They raise children, care for aging parents, and sometimes can't work because of disability. Social Security's rules reflect that interconnectedness. 8. Why the rumors cause tension. I've been in community town halls and senior advocacy meetings where this topic turned a calm room into a heated debate in less than 5 minutes. The emotions run deep, and it's not hard to understand why. When someone has worked for decades, scraping by while paying those FICA taxes, it's natural to feel protective over the benefits you believe you've earned. Add in the rising cost of living, the uncertainty about Social Security's long-term future, and the constant swirl of misinformation online. And suddenly, you've got neighbors turning against neighbors over who deserves their check. Here's what I tell people. Getting angry at your neighbor because they receive benefits without a personal work record is like getting mad at someone whose insurance covered their house after a fire, even though you never had a fire yourself. It's not about fairness between you and them. It's about whether the system is doing what it was built to do, protect people from falling into poverty in old age or after tragedy. 9. How to check if you or a family member qualifies. Now, here's the part most people don't realize. A lot of folks who should be getting benefits aren't. I once had a client, a widow in her late 70s, who was living entirely off a small pension and struggling to afford her medications. She assumed she didn't qualify for Social Security because she'd been a stay-at-home mom her whole life. One phone call to the Social Security Administration proved her wrong. She was entitled to full survivor benefits from her late husband's record. Within 2 months, her monthly income nearly doubled. You can check eligibility in 3 main ways. Use the Benefits Eligibility Screening Tool on SSA's official website. Call the Social Security Administration and speak to a representative. Visit your local SSA office for an in-person review. When you do, have your marriage records, spouses, or parents' Social Security number, and proof of disability, if applicable, ready. The more documentation you have, the faster the process goes. The key takeaway? Don't make assumptions. You might be leaving hundreds or even thousands of dollars a month unclaimed simply because you never asked. 10. Final takeaway. So yes, some people do receive Social Security benefits without personally paying into the system. But once you peel back the layers, you see it's not about freeloaders or loopholes. It's about protecting families, children, spouses, and those who never had a fair shot at working because of disability or circumstance. Instead of thinking of Social Security as mine or yours, think of it as ours, a safety net built by one generation to catch the next. That doesn't mean the program is perfect or immune from reform, but it does mean that many of the so-called free rides you hear about are, in reality, earned in a different way,